Hey, welcome back to the No Half Cakes podcast. My name is Jim Spellico, and I will be your host for this fantastic episode about leadership. I'm joined by a guest by the name of Alan McLaren, who brings a ton of experience in the leadership space. We're going to talk about authenticity. We're going to talk about personal branding. We're going to talk about who the real leaders are in today's society. We're going to talk a little bit about real estate, a little bit about Canada versus US. It's a very dynamic conversation and a lot of fun. So if I were you, I would stick around and jump right into it.
3, 2, 1.
Here we go!
Man, it had to be like 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay. Yeah. Hasn't changed that dramatically. More condos being built. That's it.
Yeah, it seems to be the way it goes everywhere. It's happening here too. Everywhere you look, they're building apartment complexes, and we always wonder, like, who is moving into these places? The rent on them is often more expensive than the mortgage on a house. And you see these people. I can't quite comprehend who is paying that much to live that close to somebody else. And it's not even like that prestigious of an area where you need like this type of real estate.
Yeah, it's wild. But I think a lot of those condos are underwater now. At least up here they are. So there's a big glut. And so developers are losing their shirts. And people who bought condos at the pre-construction things are definitely underwater because the prices have come down big time post-COVID, right? So anyways, I'm not a real estate guy, but there you go. That's a little bit about our city.
Yeah, no, I think it's important to stay aware of what's going on in your general surroundings, though, right? That makes you a better leader, better father, husband, community member.
I would think so. And you have better conversations with people too. So it's good too.
Yeah, it is true. Well, thank you for being here. I know that's probably not the most logical or normal introduction to a podcast episode you've ever had. But I do like keeping these episodes super casual and conversational because I think that's where the most magic happens in our conversations, where we can both be ourselves and just let that authenticity kind of flow out of us. So welcome.
Thank you.
I'm happy to have you here, and we'll talk a bit.
Happy to be here. Look forward to what we're going to talk about. Not even know what we're going to talk about. That's the beauty. We're just going to go. We're going to riff. Let's rock and roll.
Yeah. Well, that makes two of us, to be honest with you. I think we can probably start on the topic of personal branding, right? Because I know that you have a tremendous amount of knowledge in the leadership space and the branding space. And for me, at least from my perspective, having had a lot of conversations on leadership, they tend to get a little repetitive, right? Yeah. There's only so many ways you can tell someone to be a good leader. And I think coming from the perspective of personal branding, if you truly know who you are and you live that out, you're going to be a better leader anyway. I'd love your thoughts on that.
Well, let me start by connecting the two dots that you just brought together, personal branding and leadership. Let's call it leadership branding, because at the end of the day, when we break it all up, it's about speaking from your leadership voice. So if we think about leadership and the tenets of leadership, which, I could talk a lot about, at the end of it, it's about how you communicate with the world and how they receive your messages, and are you doing it effectively? And so what we do in the work that we have is we help leaders, uncover what that is. So they understand, you used the word authentic when we just got into this, to be our authentic selves all the time. So you and I are chatting now, we've just met. If we were meeting for coffee or a glass of wine, it'd be the same conversation. I wouldn't change. I'm not going to use my hands more. I'm not going to be more expressive. I'm just going to be who I am. And so what we do is help leaders understand that they're able to be themselves, even though they have, in some cases, a very big job, and they have authority that makes them feel bigger. They're a human being, and so are the people they lead. Call it leadership branding, and we can dive a little more into the specifics of that, but that's where they connect.
I like that. I've never heard that perspective on it before, so that's a pretty awesome one. Do you find it difficult for people to understand who they are authentically? Because there's a lot that goes into that conversation. I think oftentimes it extends far beyond the professional realm and gets into like their personal life.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how you juggle that.
Well, the questions we ask them, so we do a session called the Leadership Signal Framework, which is essentially we interview you for 90 minutes and uncover everything about you. But what happens in those questions is we make you reflect on your life. So if you talked about earlier how leadership, there's only so many ways to talk about it. Well, not when you're sharing stories. Because if I talk to you about, for example, in one of my jobs at a public company, I had to fire 175 people. I'm not a hatchet man. That's not who I am. I'm a heart leader. But I had to effectively do that job and do it really effectively. So the story and the perspectives are uniquely mine. I'm the only person that had to go through that. There are other people that had to do that in companies, but their experience is different, where the company was, what the culture was, is it a public, private company, etc., how experienced they have, how they were seen. All of those are the stories of leadership. And that's kind of like, when you equate education and you say, well, why does Harvard and Stanford and London Business School all do case studies? Because the application of leadership is in fact the challenge. And so it's the same thing in personal branding or leadership branding. We unlock what's inside you and you gain the confidence to know, oh my God, I do have a story to tell. I do have something interesting that people want to listen to. And that's the fun part that we call it moving from fog to fire. So they're unclear. And then once they get on the other side, they literally go crazy and they go, oh my God. And it's not about ego. Remember, I'm talking about, it's about service. Very much like servant leadership. Leadership branding is about service. When I do content, I'm thinking of you. How can I help you? And if you like that, you build trust. And if you build trust, then you need help, you're going to call me. That's the way the game is played.
I love that. The question to me that begs to be asked here is, how do you get someone to ask about you when a lot of people are struggling with being seen themselves? Because the thing that I see a lot is a lot of leaders still have this ego and pride issue that they're facing where they're still needing themselves to be seen.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you still need yourself to be seen, you're not capable of seeing other people for who they really are. Does that make sense?
It does. And good leadership is a tough deal, right? We all know that. Everybody knows what good leaders look like, but it's really hard for someone to be a good leader because they're being pulled in a million directions, right? They're being comped a certain way. They're being pressured by the board. They're traveling a lot. Their family lives are all messed up, and we're expecting to be perfect leaders. And it's really hard to do that when you're being pulled in different ways. But when it comes to the human, the part that we're talking, once we get them past their, I wear this hat, therefore that is who I am, and recognize, no, you start as the human, and then you have authority as a CEO. That's a different deal. So when you start to apply that and realize that people respond to your vulnerability and the humanity that you have, all those things about ego start to shed for the good leaders. The bad leaders still have ego, still say, look at me, still say, I'm in charge of the company, look at me, I'm the boss. I can't help those people. I can only help the people who are prepared to look inside so they can actually start to serve others. And that's true servant leadership. And that's what we equate it to, because that's the only way to build trust.
I love that. I like that you've used the term servant leadership a lot. I think it's a term that people throw around, but they don't necessarily know what it means. And I feel like a lot of times you see people who attempt to be a servant leader, but just end up getting walked on.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you see that same dynamic as well.
Well, they equate kind for weak. And what servant leadership truly is, it's not about you. That's number one. It's about clearing the deck so your team can be successful. That's what it's all about. There's a lot of things that go into that, but it's simple things like, I had my teammate come to me the other day with a problem. I could have said, here's the answer, because I knew the answer. But I said, what do you think? Well, I think this, this, and this. I think that's a brilliant idea. So why don't you go ahead and try that out and then report back to me? So what am I doing with that? I'm letting her learn. I'm not giving her the answer, because then she's going to be always coming to me for the answer. And now I've got all these monkeys on my back. So I'm actually serving her by asking her questions of which I know the answer, so that she can grow and develop. And if she grows and develops, then she'll be a better employee, and she's now feeling good about herself. That's one small example that most leaders will just go, no, Chris, just do that. Not right? So once you learn that it's not about you, and the best way to lead is servant, then you do the same in the leadership branding world. You just give of yourself. You become a giver, right? And that's the key. If you become a giver, you can't believe what happens. We call it, you build trust at scale, because you're online and you're doing it with video. In our case, we tell people to do video, because now people are spending time with you and they're getting to know you, and you're doing that with 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 people, there's no other way to do that. No other way to do that. So that's how we connect the dots.
I like that. I like that you do video too, because I think one of the best parts about doing video or long form content, especially, is you can't fake it for that long.
Okay.
Like it's pretty easy to fake a persona in a social media post and say, hey, this is who I am, or pretending to be. But when you do enough content, whether it's podcast or whether it's long form video, whatever it is, it's very difficult to kind of maintain a fake persona for that long. So it kind of forces them to really get into their own skin and be who they are.
Well, you know what? Sometimes you hear about curating those brands. We never use that word because it's about unlocking, right? And refining and ensuring people can see the real you. And then when they do that, it opens up parts of them they never thought were there. They never thought they could share. You know, one of our clients grew up in a very tough neighborhood in Toronto, and he's a CEO of $1 billion company here in Canada. And the stories that he tells about that, he should have been a drug dealer. He should have been dead, but he's running $1 billion company. And teachers told him that same thing. Yeah, you're going to be a drug dealer like your brother or like your... And when you think about that, wow, that's kind of trauma that's hard to come back from. What a leadership story to say, I was there and now I am running this $1 billion company. And here's how I did that. You have to be vulnerable to want to go there. But what does it do? It makes that $1 billion company human. And do you trust humans or do you trust companies? Most people trust humans, especially with AI coming, Jim, right? AI, you won't know what's real and what's fake. You know, right now it's pretty close, but probably in 5 years, it'll be impossible to tell. So we're on Team Human. We believe that we need to continue with humans doing this kind of stuff, learning from each other and growing, and then impacting each other long term. That's the game I think.
It's true. And I think that there's also this aspect of it that you'll never be able to replace with AI, that human element, right? The human emotion.
Correct.
Like, and I'm sure it'll improve over time. But I don't believe it'll ever truly replicate the human emotion and touch and feel that we have now, and that personal, authentic version of ourselves that kind of comes out and is represented in the company. And I think as people start to look at, hey, is my job going to be replaced by AI? What can they lean into and grow more in? And I think that's where that personal brand or leadership persona kind of comes in.
You know, one of the things that we talk about often is that, at least in our world, we talk about a signal that you let off as a leader, right? That's kind of your pocket. Well, a signal is really energy, right? It's so you and I just met, but we can connect with energy. I can't connect with a computer in that way. And AI, as much as it might reflect what I'm saying, and it could talk like me, use my hands like me, have my gray hair like me, it could do everything, all my mannerisms, but it doesn't have my energy because it's a computer. So, and it won't be, it will be perfect. I might look away when you ask a question because that's how my brain works. I got to look up when you have to reflect. AI is not going to do that. So I agree with you 1,000%. That is the only advantage we have because it's smarter than us and it's always going to be smarter than us, but it can't have the heart that we have yet. Maybe it can mimic it, but it's not going to have it. At least we hope, or else we're all done. So.
Right. Yeah. So you mentioned leadership through story. And I feel like this would be a good opportunity to ask if there is a story that you can share that would share, maybe a great value or a great lesson in leadership or servant leadership. And I'd kind of love to hear it if one comes to mind.
Well, there's a lot that come to mind. I will. I'll go back to you want my own story, like a story from my background as a CEO.
Whatever you got, whether it's personal or someone you've.
Yeah. So let me start. I had a company that my first president's job actually. So I'll give you some context. It was a $30 million business with 150 employees, 9 offices, and $8 million in losses. So that's what I walked into. The survey that was given when I got there, we were 2 out of 10 on the employee satisfaction survey. So not a good way to come into a company. So what did I apply? So the first thing I realized was, okay, there's some strategic things. There's some people that need to be fired. There are all those things that had to go. But the reason the business turned around was because of communication and authenticity. What happened was, and it's really simple concept, Jim, and it's nothing new, but leaders need to follow through once they communicate. And what do I mean by that? So you might do things like breakfast with the boss and, going town halls and all those things. Everybody does those. You know how many people follow through after those are done? The good leaders do. So in my case, I would go to every office and I'd have the meetings and I'd listen to them. And then here was the commitment I made. I will take all your ideas and I will tell you which ones we're implementing and which ones we're not and why. And if we'll ever implement them or if they're just a big no and this is why. It turned the company around because people were not fearful anymore. We actually had a union that was coming in. They got eliminated because I said, I want to listen to you guys. What will the union do for you? And then I implemented some things that allowed them to realize, let's create this little family. It was 130 people when I was done. But let's create this family and let's get ourselves rowing the same way. So again, it wasn't about me, it was about them, and I'm listening to them and executing on their behalf and being honest and being clear. And when it was a no, it was a no, and this is why it was a no. So that's an example from my background that I implemented, and I learned a ton from it because it worked.
Love that. Yeah, I think that highlights an awesome point too, in that sharing stories and experiences is such a great way for other people to learn, because it kind of gives them a lens to see their own reality or their own perspective through, rather than just saying, hey, here is the textbook definition of this is exactly what you're supposed to do. But kind of sharing that story gives them an opportunity to sit and reflect, like, hey, is there a time where I can relate to that? Or I can make that relatable to my own perspective.
Well, you think about the story I told you earlier about that simple question, right, that I asked my team member yesterday. I remember back when I was doing some training for managers, and I said, when someone comes into your office, they have a monkey on their back, and they want to help you. They want you to help them solve the problem. So as soon as you take the problem on, that monkey comes onto your back. You have 15 staff and they all come in. You have 15 monkeys on your back, as opposed to pushing the problem back to them, allowing them to grow and learn. And now you don't have 15 monkeys on your back. You got none, because a true CEO, and it's not easy to be one, by the way, so let's be honest, is the band leader, the visionary, and is not solving day-to-day problems, because that's why you hire people. So you got to push back on them to make them do that. That's a really simple concept, but that's a story I've just told you that you'll remember, because you'll remember the monkey. Oh, I got a monkey on my back. He came into my office. Now I got 2 monkeys on my back. As opposed to, make sure you ask the question even when you know the answer. That's going to go right over somebody's head. That's what stories do. They resonate because they connect. So you're absolutely right.
Love that. So we can equate that to multiplying monkeys. I think there's a great way to kind of sum that up.
Yeah, we should write a book called Multiplying Monkeys. That's perfect.
It's very true, though. And I think that that's what a majority of CEOs end up doing, right? Because they have this kind of mentality, especially if it's someone who is a founder. I'm sure you've seen this as well. Someone who is a founder who turns into the founder and CEO. They're the person who then wants to be the one to do everything. Half of it, I think, is because they started out doing everything themselves. So they still kind of have this perception that they can do it better. Or two is they just have made the decision that it needs to be done to a certain exact specific way, and nobody can do it like they can do it. And I think that those people limit their growth tremendously.
It's exactly the reason why companies can reach $1 million or $5 million and then they need a new leader. This is why, because if you founded something, it's your baby. Like I've founded two businesses, and you're in, and you have to be in, right? And then as you grow, you have to grow out of your role. You have to, or else you'll never grow the business, because you're a bottleneck. So when you build, as we all know, building your team is not a joke. That's why, you hire slow and fire fast, because it's really important to build a really good team to do the work that you want to, and make sure you're developing them, because they don't want to be stagnant either. They want to grow into the next role. And if you're a small company and you're 5 people today and you're going to be 10 people tomorrow, they want to be part of that, group where they're leading those folks. And then everybody gets better as time goes on, and your life becomes easier as a CEO, because now you can go do other things, be a rainmaker, or spend more time on your leadership brand and build partnerships that allow the business to flourish better. And so it's not a complicated formula. It's just hard to execute because you're being pulled in so many different directions, personally and professionally.
Yeah. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why it is so important to understand who you are, so you don't take on everyone else's identity and everyone else's problems.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, when we had a marketing agency prior to opening our leadership branding agency, and I'd never looked at myself that way. I never did. And I had a situation, Jim, that was, it only happens when you die. And thank God I'm not dead yet. But I'm part of YPO, and I was running a board, and they had a party for me, a going away party. And then they wrote in this book all the picture book, and they wrote in these things that were lovely things that they said to me. I am not a crier. I could not keep my eyes from watering, because what you don't realize in leadership is the impact you have on people, because they don't say it. Well, you're an amazing leader. Like, you don't get that in the business. But when you're with peers, and I was with peers, they were able to vulnerably tell me, you know, that day that you remembered when my father died and you called me 3 months later and said, how am I doing? I will never forget that. I never thought about it for a second after that. But the impacts you make, the deposits you make as a leader, and the things you screw up, they remember forever. But if you do good things, you're building a nice little balance of things that can be, when you do something bad, they'll go, well, that was unintentional because I know his heart's in it the right way. He must have been really stressed that day. That's what knowing yourself does, because then you know when you're off kilter. Like, I know I'm a heart-centered leader. I know I can be tough at times, but I'm never mean. So if I say to someone who's maybe not done something right for the fourth time, I'm saying, okay, we've had 3 conversations. There's not going to be a 4th conversation. If we're having a 5th one, you're going to be looking for another job. They now know, oh, I can't go any further with that because I've reached the end of his rope. He's got a long one. What will happen? The next person sees that and goes, okay, first time you ask me, I'm going to get it done properly, or I'm going to do my best. So that's the balance of authority versus heart versus whatever. And then you know when you're off. If I'm making decisions with my head, not my heart, that's not authentic for me. But I also have to understand that that is my my Achilles heel too, right? It could hurt me if I'm looking something with my heart when I should be looking at it with my head. But I know that about myself. And that's what really helps with the leadership branding, is now you know that. So you're very clear on who you are. And then you got to execute authentically that way, and have a coach to help you. Because that's the part. You will go off kilter. Coach sometimes brings you back, right? So,
yeah, that leans right into the question I was going to ask. There is
beautiful.
kind of, it begs the question to me is, do you need someone in your corner who is maybe head centered rather than heart centered, so you can kind of bounce ideas off each other and balance each other out, so to speak?
Well, you know what's interesting? So my business partner, Leanne, is we've been together 25 years as business partners. That's a record all by itself. She's a completely different human. She is a full-on ADHD, highly creative, really intelligent person. If I use the word process in her, or process in her presence, she falls apart she just can't stand that stuff. So I am the process guy, or the process guy, and she's the really creative one, creative with words. She connects with customers. She's brilliant in the things that she's talented at. And so it doesn't mean heart and head. It means balancing out what you don't have. And if you're lucky enough to find that kind of partnership, as we have, then we know that we battle about things, and the right answer is somewhere in the middle. Because I'm coming at it from, process and admin and all that other stuff, and she's coming at it from a different place, and it works really well. So always have a great compliment to you. Don't hire you, because then what are you going to do with another you? So yeah.
Which is the thing I think a lot of leaders get wrong, is they look for someone to replace them as another version of them, which ultimately is impossible to find. But I think the other part of that too is, if you have an entire group of people who think the same exact way, half of them are probably unnecessary, because they're not going to think outside the box. They're not going to bring a different perspective. They're just going to agree with everything you say. Like, I do think that they should be all aligned in the same direction, but have different sets of beliefs kind of that fold underneath or inside of that.
Or, Jim, also to feel confident enough to be able to speak up without being disrespectful. Because listen, when you reach leadership positions as a CEO, there's a little ego there, just automatic, because it's part of what drives you. But when you let that go aside, and when you're in a boardroom, and you see it all the time, you should not be able to pick off who the CEO is. That would be a trick, but it doesn't happen. It's easy to find out who, because everybody's looking over at Jim and going, what's Jim think when I say something? As opposed to feeling comfortable enough to have a culture that we're going to do the right thing for the right reason. And oh, by the way, the CEO has the final call. They all know that, but we're all going to contribute so that we leave the boardroom singing from the same songbook. And if we don't agree with the CEO, it doesn't matter. We're singing from the same songbook, and we'll continue to measure it. If it doesn't work, we'll change it. That's not easy to do, but that's what good leadership looks like for me.
Yeah. And I couldn't agree more. I think when you look at some of the best teams, whether it's in
Mm-hmm.
the professional realm or even in sports, they are not led by an MVP. They're led by a captain,
Correct.
or they're led by a group of people who have just tremendous skill in one specific area that complement each other well.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the terms we like to use is complete, not compete. And I think when you look at a team that focuses on completing the other players in it, again, whether it's sports or professional or even your own family, like if you look at completing the other person beside you rather than competing with them for a certain position or a certain level of authority, whatever it is, those teams are unstoppable. And I kind of love how you said that.
Well, I love the analogy of sports because you cannot have a team of 20 superstars. Doesn't work because then they're all battling for the ball and everybody has to know their role and based on their talents and you maximize all of those talents. It's just the best way to think about it because why do teams look for the grinder and the rebounder and the this and the that and the team guy and the passing guy and whatever? It's the same in life. Okay, great salesperson, less of a salesperson, but what a great customer service person. We need both. But you need to understand what you're trying to deliver too, but it's always about people. It comes back to that every single time because you can't do it on your own. You just can't. I mean, you can use AI a little bit now more than ever before, but I still think a good team is going to take you other places.
100%. So I love that you're from a different area than I am, right? So when I ask this question, it's going to have a better answer, I would think. When we look at leadership as it's represented in society right now, I don't see a lot of great examples of leadership that
Yeah.
I would emulate, right? I don't look around at our society and say, hey, yeah, that is a great leader. I want my kid to grow up like that. Now, granted, that's my job as his father to show him, speaking about my son specifically, what a father, what a husband should look like. I don't see that represented super well, if at all, in society today. And I'm curious for your perspective on that,
Yeah.
on where people should look to great examples of leadership.
Well, a couple of things. I think you're right about the global, all the things that you see in the media prove out what you were talking about. And there are a lot of reasons for that. We can get into it. There are a lot of political reasons. There are spiritual or religious reasons. There's a lot of reasons why leadership sucks. Like, let's be honest. But you can look, there are leaders that are incredible in your life. You just got to look for them, whether it's, spiritual leaders, amazing coaches. What we're doing today is a type of leadership. Your father or your mother or your friends or your family, there are some in your circle that are amazing leaders. And so you got to look there first because that is real. The stuff we see is curated. The stuff we see is like they wear the same tie, they wear the same this, and they wear the same blouse, and they talk the same way. So they're not real. Just like Hollywood's not real, our political world's not real. Arguably, some parts of our spiritual world is not real. But I would look there, and then once you find them, I mean, this is what I love about online. Is you can find some people that you can learn from, whether it's TikTok or LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook. Find those people that resonate with you and follow their content in 90-second to 2-minute clumps or in podcasts that you think are good. Whether you're learning from them or laughing from them, they're all there. You just got to find them. And some people, love a Deepak Chopra or a Mel Robbins or whatever. They're still curated leaders, but they got a lot of good stuff to teach us, right? So once you find those people that you feel connected with, then stay connected with them because they will teach you things. But nothing's like your dad or your mom, Jim, to your point. And for all parents out there who are leaders, your kids are only 8 and 9 once. If you're working your ass off 100 hours a week and you don't know them, when they get to be 18, they won't know you. So make sure, this is the advice I give all my young mentees that I talk to. While you're kicking ass and taking names, invest in your fitness, meaning your health, and your family, and your friends, and your business. Balance it out in some way. It's never balanced, but don't throw it all into work because you'll be a very lonely rich person when you get to be in your 30s and you'll have no one to share it with. So really important to find that stuff out early. And it's simple, right? Your kids are going to bed. You be there with them when you can. Read them the story when you can. They will never forget that. I can tell you this, as someone who has adult children, They never forget when you missed the soccer game. They never forget that you weren't there. They never forget you didn't call them or text them. So be present in their lives, and same for your friends and spirituality or fitness or whatever is important to you outside of that.
Yeah. I love that. And obviously, it's literally the whole ethos of what I'm doing here with the No Half Cakes movement.
That's true.
But I do want to clarify a little bit, because I
Sure.
think some people will put undue pressure on themselves to never miss a soccer game or never miss a bedtime. And life is going to happen. Sometimes it's inevitable. It's going to interfere in some way, shape, or form. But again, I think that goes back to being heart-centered and showing up authentically, where they understand who the priority is. Look, unfortunately, some things are going to happen that are out of your control. You may not be able to physically show up at every school event or everything. It's just not always the case. But I think when you are authentic and living authentically, they can tell the difference, right? And when you said before, hey, when they're 18, they're not going to know you, I agree with the point there. But I think the counterpoint too is they're going to know you. They're going to tell what your priorities are, and they're going to know how you show up. Yeah. They're going to see through whatever lies and BS you try and tell them. At a certain 100%. Point, they're going to understand exactly who you are. And 100%. If you don't show up and make them a priority and give them an example of followable excellence, what's going to happen is they're going to look to the outside world for, hey, what does a leader look like? What should I model my life after? Guess what? They're not going to find them. You're right. And that's when you're going to start to see that drift occur. So I couldn't have said it any better myself. But
yeah, it's a brilliant.
As we kind of draw to a close here.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Jim. Sorry. And I just wanted to just close it. And for leaders to understand that you're not always visible, but you're always visible when you're thinking about them. So if you can't make the soccer game, you make sure you text them or call them after the soccer game and say, "How did it go?" Right. So they know that you're always in their mind and in their head. You can't be there physically. They know that you give it. And that is what is part of that. You can always do that unless you're not thinking about them. And that's the other part. So anyway.
I love that. Well, I want to thank you again for this conversation. It was deep and insightful. And again, leadership is a topic that could sometimes be boring, but this wasn't. So honor to you for showing up authentically as yourself and giving us something to think about today.
Thank you, Jim. It was a real easy conversation, and thank you for that. And I look forward to many more.
My pleasure. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Happy birthday to you.
Cha, cha, cha.
Happy birthday.